Hello, this is Holly Tanner with the Herman and Wallace Pelvic Rehab Institute, and I'm here with Ginger Garner, who's going to tell us about her new coursework on the voice and pelvic floor. And Ginger, of course, this isn't new to you, but really having this coursework more available following some national presentations that you've already completed. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself first in terms of your background, and then how that merged into creating this body of work?
Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for those of you who are listening for taking the time to do that. Well, briefly, probably the very first thing that I ever did and loved was music, and never thought that the two would overlap until clinically when I started to really focus on pelvic health. I think probably all of us in pelvic health started in orthopedics, and I'm no different, not a special story, where I started out in sports medicine. I was a licensed athletic trainer, worked in all the sports, did all those things, and then really started to focus in on pelvic health, and then started having my own kids, and I realized how much my voice was impacted by being pregnant and what happens during pregnancy in a state of natural inflammation that it is, and how it changed not just my pelvic floor function, obviously, but my voice as well. And I used to do a lot of performances too, and I noticed how it impacted my work and my voice. If I did 3 or 4 gigs a week, I sang jazz and other types of genres, that I could tell a really big difference. And so when I started to look at the literature and compare that against what I had experienced as a clinician and personally as a singer and as a person with a pelvic floor, it became just, undeniable, those links. And then I think the most recent evolution is being able to add ultrasound imaging to what I'm doing in the clinic, and having someone voice something so simply. They could just say their name, and seeing kind of the cascade of things that happen, in the clinic as I'm treating them for pelvic health issues.
Mhm. And along those lines, when you mention that, I actually find that that's one of the more difficult things to detrain is that maybe over activation or inappropriate activation. Someone is speaking quietly to you and their paraspinals are turning on with every syllable, right?
Yes.
Or things like that. So that's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about this particular course and how it's structured and what someone might learn from coming to the class in terms of, didactic information, things that they might do that are hands-on oriented.
I'll start out by saying it's a very practical class, because I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, I have to have a background in sound or music, or have to be really interested in the voice or treating people with voice issues. That's totally not the case. You don't have to treat any singers or performers or anything like that. Could you be better at doing that after the class? Sure. But the chief thrust of this is to make better pelvic health clinicians, out of whomever chooses to attend. So it's practical in that we're going to discuss the base background for the foundations of the voice, the respiratory diaphragm, the pelvic floor and diaphragm, and how those interact with each other. And then what you can expect to see based on the literature in terms of how your voice influences your stress response, for example. There'll be some unexpected pieces in there, for people, because we're not just talking about anatomy, physiology, and practical applications for the clinic, although, yes, that's very important. We're also talking about how the voice can impact people's perception of their self-efficacy, of the power that they carry at work as a clinician. Do they feel heard? Do they feel understood? Do they feel respected at work? We'll also look at gender roles and what happens when people make assumptions about voices and how you sound, and how that plays out in the literature, all the way up to, even the Supreme Court. So of the United States, because the voice matters. It's how we carry ourselves, it's how we communicate. And all of those things go together to give us kind of a social cultural construct that impacts our stress response and how we function every day. So yes, it's about anatomy and physiology, and the first 4 hours is online, on demand. The last 2 hours are listening to me talk in lab and practicing things. But we're also going to talk about that socio-cultural impact, and how we can create that shift, how we can empower ourselves and our patients to kind of claim the power of your own voice to, yes, improve pelvic health, but also improve overall well-being.
Oh, that sounds like such rich topics woven together, and I think that doesn't surprise me given your integrative, approach to the
Yeah.
world, if you will, and also to education and to clinical practice. Along those lines, I think there are very tangible, practical pieces. Someone could be saying to you in this class, gosh, I'm teaching all day long, and my own voice gets really fatigued, and therefore uncovering some of those pieces of the puzzle or the link, or dealing with pathology states like COPD, right? Or even perhaps for some folks, long COVID sequela. Like there's just so many rich pieces to bring together. And I have to ask, is there yoga in the class?
Yes, I will actually show you how I've used yogic breathing, very specific yogic breathing types through imaging. We'll look at some of those pieces of the puzzle because let's just say a regular diaphragmatic breath looks different than, say, an ujjayi or overcoming, what's called overcoming a victorious breath in yoga. There are more advanced yogic breathing techniques that can be used to impact different states of, let's say, forced expiration, in the exhalation. So that whether I need relaxation of the pelvic floor or kind of uptraining of the core with the pelvic floor, we can do that through yoga. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, and I tend to make this assumption that, well, everybody knows Ginger and her background. However, I think it might be fun for those perhaps who are meeting you for the first time. Can you share a little bit about the breadth of the things that you bring to your professional work?
Sure. Well, I started out wanting to go to law school. So there's that. And then I took this, whichever turn you want to call it, and chose physical therapy because it was active and dynamic and moving. And the idea of my nose only in a book sitting behind a desk didn't feel so exciting anymore. So I changed that. But I've, all along the way kept a love of justice and policy. So I think that's what drives a lot of what I do. And I particularly love teaching the voice to pelvic floor connection in an integrative way because of that. Because a lot of the times, the things that drive disparities in physical therapy and accessibility, being able to find a PT that can help you, are driven by these kind of justice type issues. So a lot of my background is driven by a love for helping people get access to PT and also making it affordable. It's what drove me to open, I guess it was one of the first yoga PT hybrid clinics back in the 90s, because I saw working in the insurance system that, and it made me really angry that my patients in chronic pain that needed the yoga aspect of it. I wasn't getting denied because of the yoga. They were never asking about that. I've always gotten paid to do yoga inside physical therapy. That's never been a problem. It's because of their diagnostic code, their ICD, I guess, 9 code at that time, that they were denying care for them. And so my hands were tied. I couldn't provide care for them even if I wanted to. So I said, you know what, there's a way around this. And so I opened that first yoga PT kind of integrative clinic in order to be able to circumvent that and provide low cost solutions for people to be able to access integrative care. And so that was back in the 90s. And then that finally pushed me towards, as I was moving towards, unbeknownst to me, I was moving towards motherhood eventually, once, twice, 3 times, and experiencing, a very broken system where I don't know how I would have gotten through and rehabbed what I went through if I didn't have the integrative side. So the integrative side has always driven my and informed my treatment, and also my work in speaking and teaching and writing because of those early patients where, and there was a specific day on a specific time that I can close my eyes and remember like it was yesterday, where I lifted my head up and I realized that everything that I was doing that was really truly impacting my patients in the most profound way was yoga and mindfulness based. That it wasn't the rote stuff that I was learning in PT, that I had learned in PT school. It was everything outside of that. But they had to be combined together. I couldn't just use yoga alone because yoga was largely not evidence based, not even evidence informed remotely. So I've spent the majority of my time, I feel like, in my work evolving yoga to fit people, mostly women, but of all genders. It's very non-binary. Men can have hip dysplasia just like women can, and for all genders. So we struggle with different things, and I feel like historically, well, we know historically yoga was created for men and boys, not everybody else in the world. So I feel like that's where I've spent the majority of my time, which is where my first book came from, medical therapeutic yoga. And then I stepped back from that and thought, okay, I spent all this time, in biomechanics of yoga and just getting the integrative piece out there. But yoga is kind of a lifestyle medicine in itself. Talking about sleep, stress management, nutrition, eliminating environmental influences like endocrine disruptors. That's all within that context of yoga as a philosophy. So that led to the second book, Integrative and Lifestyle Medicine and Physical Therapy, that I co edited with Joe Tata, and that we invited 40 authors, including ourselves, so two of us and 38 others. And it's all physical therapists writing about what we know is within our scope, which is all the things that I just mentioned. And so that kind of brings you up to where I am today. I love policy and advocacy. I love the voice to pelvic floor connection, and it must all be delivered in an integrative context. And that just is what makes me want to get up in the morning and go.
I love it. And you have at least one website where folks can learn more about you if they're curious.
I do. Based on that concept from a long time ago of people not being able to access care, I've held that mission, as one of my core values to make it accessible. I've been in cash-based practice since 2004, and a lot of there might be a misconception of, oh, someone's in cash-based to make more money, but I went into cash-based to be able to see people and help them. So I've kept two websites, which is a little bit of a pain, but I do it anyway. One is integrativelifestylemed.com, and that's where people can get professional training, but it's also where, especially during COVID, I couldn't have an actual person to person, face to face experience teaching. So I moved all that stuff online. And so now the general public can access wellness, integrative, lifestyle medicine type classes and workshops there at integrativelifestylemed.com. So that's my carryover from accessibility, low cost, really, really, affordable. I give scholarships if you cannot afford it. I don't like to turn people away because of money. So you can get classes as low as like $25 or something there. And then my clinic, which is where I am now, is Garner Pelvic Health, and that's garnerpelvichealth.com, and that's where you can see me and what my staff are working on, and where we're located here in Greensboro.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to tell us about your course. I know it's a long time in the works in some ways, and it sure is an exciting time to share that information with everyone.
It is. It is. I'm excited to share this kind of first 6 hours of information with people, deliberately keeping it shorter, not to overload, but so you can take this information, immediately apply it. And those of you who have or are looking forward to it, I'd love to get your feedback on how it's going. I hear stories all the time. So don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I love hearing from you all.
Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Holly.